Hello, everybody. A very good afternoon. This is Kim Pong, and I am the CEO of Strength Asia, and so glad to see everybody here this afternoon. I just want to check in and make sure that everybody is hearing me. So I know my team, the videos are all on here, so if you guys can just wave your hands a little bit, I kind of know that you are hearing me. Wonderful. Great. So welcome once again, everybody. Now, the last session, if you guys actually came on and to attend my talk on the speak up culture, I must apologize to everybody here because in my mind I thought it was a 60-minute talk when we told everybody it's a 30-minute talk. So a lot of you actually stayed beyond the 30-minute mark here. So I am just extremely grateful that you guys stayed back and you found it helpful and entertaining, right, to be with us in the talk here. But today I'll show you it's going to be for 30 minutes, so everybody will leave the room by 30 minutes time here. Thank you very much for coming to join my team and I this afternoon here. Today we are talking about the inclusive leader, about building high performance with diversity. So I'm just very curious, right, of the people who are in the room this afternoon. I'm going to ask you to use the chat box here to interact with me. So I would love for you to just introduce yourself very quickly before we get into the topic itself. So very quickly, just share with us a little bit about, or share with me a little bit about, what is it that you are doing in terms of work, and is your organization a diverse organization, right? So just two pieces of information. Number one, what is it that you do? And number two, do you think that your organization, embraces diversity, or is it a very homogeneous, organization here, right? So go ahead and use the chat box here. We'd love to hear your response. So I'm going to give everybody just maybe a minute or so to respond to the chat box while I wait for the answers here. Thank you, Jyoti, for writing in. So Jyoti's from L&D with 3M. Welcome, Jyoti. Glad to see you. What about the rest of you, right? So what is it that you do? Is your organization? So what have you been doing in terms of your work? And is your organization a diverse organization? So let me just wait for a little while. Don't be shy, guys. Nobody can see you. All right, very cool. So I'm just going to wait. I can see some friends like, Dr. Sherman Ong, Eileen, Bonnie. Yep, lovely. Welcome, everybody. And yeah, thank you from Bonnie from Hong Kong. And yeah, so Bonnie's organization is inclusive. They work with the visually impaired people. Sherman is a strength coach, and he works with diversity all the time. Jody talks about her organization is making the effort. DEI is a priority. Way to go! Wonderful. Cool. All right. So I'm sure the rest of you are still kind of getting onto the momentum of doing this. So feel free, right? As I'm talking, go ahead and plunk it in, right? Now, the other thing that I'm going to advise, suggest that you do is this. In the course of my sharing later on, if you do have any questions, right, immediately kind of put it into the chat box. Don't wait till the end, because sometimes by the time we get to the end, we kind of like forget what a question would be. But in the course of my sharing, you realize that, hey, I have a question, I have an insight, I have a comment. Put it immediately into the chat box. My team will actually alert me towards the end if such questions here. Okay, so with that, let's get started on our topic today. The inclusive leader, building high performance with diversity. And I want to start with a question for everybody here. When you get into the office, for the very first time, or when you go to the office you've been to for many times, or when you're in a party, right, or you go to an engagement, my question for you is this, right? Do you choose to be with people who are like you, or do you choose to be with people who are different from you, right? What would your response be? So if you look at yourself in terms of your interaction with people around you generally, right? Whether is it being in the office for the first time, or it's just the office you've been going to for all, for a long time right now, or you're going to a party, or you're going to an engagement, who do you choose to be naturally, right? Do you choose to be with people who are like you, or do you choose to be with people who are different from you? So once again, if I can ask you to use the chat box and share with me a little bit of your preferences here. So the answers I'm looking for is, like me or different from me, right? So like me or different from me. So go ahead and do that while I wait for the response to come in. Yeah, I just saw that Matthew R just sent in. Yeah, managing a sales team in a homogeneous environment. Beautiful. Yeah. So Bonnie Chan says, yeah, like me. Jody says, like me. Ronnie Fu says, like me. Lee says, like me. Mayan says, like me. Beautiful. Thank you very much. My answer to that question for myself, like me also, right? Now, this is really interesting, guys, because by and large, most people, the answer would be like me. And why is that? The reason is a really simple one. We prefer, to be with people who are like us because it simply feels safer, it feels more comfortable, it feels more predictable. That's why, a lot of times, people, of the same race, they kind of gather together. People of the same ethnicity, they gather together, same culture, same interests. We tend to find the people who have similar interests to us, similar cultures, similar background to us, simply because we don't have to spend too much energy to second guess, one another in some fundamental things, right? It somehow makes what we do with one another, the interaction, a whole lot more safer, a whole lot more comfortable, and a whole lot more predictable. But the interesting thing is this, right? There's a lot of talk about, DI, right? Diversity and inclusion nowadays in our corporate circles here. And the interesting thing is this, every time when you introduce, diversity into the mixture, all of a sudden diversity begins to put safety, comfort and predictability at risk. All of a sudden we see people, from the different background from us, people, with a different sexual orientation even, right? Or people, with a very different culture from us. And all of a sudden, there's a sense of how do I interact with you? Are certain questions appropriate? Are certain opinions, likely gonna offend you or otherwise, right? The sense of safety, the sense of comfort, the sense of predictability becomes at risk. And there's a lot of research on the consequences of diversity. So a lot of research tells us that diversity can cause the lack of trust between members, right? They can cause, discomfort between people. They can even cause, people to be less cohesive, and they can cause interpersonal conflicts, and they can even lower, the effectiveness of communication. So this is a really interesting thing, right? The research actually tells us that diversity actually does affect, the interpersonal interactions and relationships with people negatively. So the question, for you and I is this here. The question is simply, I just realized I didn't record this. Can somebody record it on our end here, right? So the question is simply this, right? Why diversity? Why is diversity, so important to our teams, to our organization, to our businesses here? And the reason is a very simple reason, ladies and gentlemen, because high-performing, innovating teams need diversity in order to flourish and to thrive. When you are in a homogeneous environment, and compared to an environment that has diverse ideas, diverse personalities, diverse background, the people, that has greater diversity tends to favor the high performance, tend to favor the more innovating aspects of the team. High performing and innovating teams need diversity. And I want to share with you a really, really interesting experiment that was done in 2006 by two professors by the name of Norcroft and Neal, from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and Stanford University. And this is what they did, right? They wanted to figure out, is a homogeneous group better at solving a murder mystery compared to a diverse group here? So what they did was this, they gathered people into different kind of groups. Some groups was all white, right? And some groups was all mixed, right? There's white, there are Asians, and there are blacks in there, right? And what happened is everyone in the groups here are giving specific information that are vital to the solving of the murder mystery. And the challenge is this: solve the murder mystery accurately and as quickly as fast as you possibly can. And what they found out was fascinating. The diverse groups constantly outperform the groups that are homogeneous. In other words, the mixed groups of ethnicity outperform those that are just pure white groups here. And this was an interesting, very, very exciting discovery, for the researchers here. Why is that? They realize that when you are in a group of people that are the same as you, you tend to make some assumptions. You tend to make the assumptions that they actually know what you know, right? That's one. You tend to make the assumptions that, we are comfortable enough to be able to share ideas that are different. So the idea that, hey, we are the same and therefore we think the same, we behave the same, becomes so engraved in the behavior that it actually became a disadvantage to the solving of the murder mystery. Whereas for people who are very different in terms of culture, in terms of ethnicity, when they come together, immediately they notice that you and I, we are very different. And immediately there is a sense that, hey, what I know may be something that you do not know, and what I have may be something that you do not have. And because of that, heightened awareness of differences, these people were able to exchange far more effectively about the different pieces of information that was required in the solving of the murder mystery. What did the experiment show us? Well, the experiment shows us some very interesting ideas here. Number one, that diversity actually makes us smarter, right? And number two, diversity actually do drive greater creativity and innovation. And finally, diversity provokes new thinking. Otherwise, when you are in your homogeneous group, you probably have pretty much a group think kind of mentality. But because of diversity, it provokes new thinking. When you're in a diverse environment, it actually makes people work a lot harder, both cognitively and socially. Now, many of us may not like the discomfort, maybe the lowering of some familiar environmental safety issues or whatever, but diversity actually makes us work harder and cognitively and socially here. And we might not like it, but the hard work, right? If we put our hard work to making diversity work, it actually will lead to better outcomes. Let me say some things about what diversity is and what diversity is not. Diversity is never easy, right? It's never easy, because to make diversity work in our places, it's not just about policies, but it is about hard work. Diversity is hard work. The second thing here is this: diversity is not painless. And by painless, I don't mean, what I mean is this, right? That companies just issue the policies that, hey, we have to have better D&I awareness in our organization, and all of a sudden, everybody just jump onto the bandwagon and adopt it. No, it never ever happened like this. Diversity is not painless. In fact, to embrace diversity, there's a lot of pain in it, right? Diversity is about accepting pain as part of the process of innovation and growth. Now, just like when you exercise, right? When you're building strength, every time when you're exercising, when you're building strength, when you're jogging, there's always the pain before the gain. And the same thing for diversity is this: if you're able to embrace diversity and make it work, it is a strength to you. But in embracing that, you have to be accepting the pains as part of the process of innovation and growth. The next thing here is this: diversity is not just about a team of people, coming from different diverse backgrounds. It's not just a gathering of the different, but diversity is the team seeking and understanding and harnessing the power of our differences here. Right? It's about harnessing the power of our gender, the power of our ethnicity, the power of our sexual orientation, the power of our various disciplines, the power, of our skills, of our culture, of our background here. And, about 300 years ago, this fascinating story of harnessing the power of diversity actually, happened back in 1714. Now, in 1714, 300 years ago, right, more than 300 years ago, the British Parliament, issued a new mandate, right, a new act, called the Longitude Act. Now, what is the Longitude Act? Well, essentially, it's about the sea navigation here. Now, what happened is this: back in the good old days, there's no such things as GPS, and internet, right? You literally got to figure out ways on how to navigate your position when you are sailing out in the open waters. And in those days, right, back in 1700s, it was relatively easy for the mariners and the seafaring folks here to be able to navigate north and south, of their journey here. They literally don't use a lot of instruments in order to help them figure out where's north and where's south, because they literally can look at the elements around them to figure out the north and south position of their ships. So for example, they could be looking at the Polaris, right, which is the North Star. So by looking at the Polaris into the horizon, the higher the North Star, the Polaris, that's above the horizon, the more northern part of the Earth they are, right? The higher they are in the latitudes here. And the lower the Polaris star is, right, which means it's closer to the horizon, the more down south they are. So people can figure out the north and south. The other thing that they can do also is this, right? If they are sailing in the waters and they actually are hugging the coast of land, or they can see land in the distance, they could use this land and the landmarks here to navigate their positions. So the problem actually happens when these ships, these mariners, right, actually go beyond the land, where now they are out into open waters. Like I mentioned just now, north and south, they could figure out. But the problem is the east and west. It's about which longitude are they at. And this was a massive problem, to the British Empire at that point in time, because they really want to make sure that their mariners, their seafarers are able, to preserve the seaworthiness of their vessels, are able to preserve the lives of their people, of their sailors, and are able to preserve, more importantly, right, the trade that was happening across, different countries at that point in time. And at a point in time back in the 1700s, one of the most thriving and flourishing trades was the slave trade. So the British had every interest to make sure that the mariners have the best of technology to navigate the oceans. So they came up with the Longitude Act here, right? This thing is called the Longitude Act back in 1714, and they gave a reward of £20,000 for anyone that can actually figure out how to fix the position on the longitude here. Now, £20,000 in 1714, in today's equivalent, is more than £3 million. So you can imagine that was a lot of money. And a lot of people actually jump on board the bandwagon here, right, to try to figure out the problem, including people like Isaac Newton. So all these guys were, seafaring folks. These guys were mariners. These guys were, navigational people. These guys were astronomers, right? But what was interesting was this: the problem was not solved eventually by any of these people in the shipping or in the sailing community. It was solved by someone that was totally outside of the community, somebody who's an outsider, somebody who has got no navigational skills, who's got no exposure to astronomy, someone who has never, been interned on a ship, for the exposure of sailing, somebody that's never captained in a ship before. This person came out from the outside. He was never part of the community. And his name is called John Harrison, and he was a clockmaker. Think about this. This guy, John Harrison, a clockmaker, eventually figured out that he can actually use time across the different longitudes to figure out and pinpoint the position of the ships in open waters. Now, his challenge was to create a clock that works not just on land, but a clock that works on water. Now, I wish I can tell you more about this because it's a fascinating story, but we don't have a lot of time. So let me just give you a very quick overview on this. Back in those 1700s, the way people measure time on land is to use the pendulum, right? But the minute you take the pendulum and bring it to the water, because the boat is kind of moving up and down like this, the pendulum do not work at all. So John Harrison had to figure out a way of making sure that time is consistent anywhere you go, no matter where the boat is and no matter how much the boat is shaking. And he created this wonderful thing called the chronometer. And back in the 1700s, the chronometer was born, and people began to use it to navigate the longitudinal positions of their boats. But having said that, it wasn't something that John Harrison did it in a number of years. It took him more than 50 years to figure out the solution. Think about that. Now, that to me was a fascinating story of diversity, basically making us smarter. That is a fascinating story of diversity driving creativity and innovation from the outside. John Harrison was never part of the community at all, right? That is an example that diversity provokes new thinking. So here's the point here that we are talking about, since the start of this session. It is about you being the inclusive leader. right? The inclusive leader that's leading, and building performance, high performance with diversity here. My question to you, ladies and gentlemen, is this: are you an inclusive leader, or are you a homogeneous leader? So how do you know, right, whether you're an inclusive leader or whether you're a homogeneous leader, right? So I'd like to share, some ideas here to help you figure out, who are you in terms of the kind of leader that you are, right? And I'm going to share with you, the 4 qualities of an inclusive leader. I'll share with you the 4 enemies of inclusive leadership. And I'm going to share with you 4 things that inclusive leaders do all the time, right, to build diversity. And then after that, I'm going to share with you the one thing that inclusive leader must do in order to get diversity to thrive in their teams. So let's get on with it, right? The first thing is the 4 qualities of inclusive leadership here. The first quality is this, right? It is about here I am, there you are, right? Let me explain what that means to you. So an inclusive leader has this quality of here I am, there you are. When he or she walks into the room, he's not going to tell everybody, hello, everybody, here I am, look at me, right? No. But the inclusive leader, they don't say that. They say it the other way. There you are, right? I see you, I see you, I see you, I see you. They naturally turn their attention not to themselves, but they naturally turn their attention to their teammates, to people around them, because it's not about here I am, but it's more about, hey, there you are, right? That's the first quality. The second quality of an inclusive leader is that they are open and they're engaging and they're collaborative. These inclusive leaders never ever see themselves as the means to all solutions or to the answers of all problems, but they see themselves as me that needs you, and then there's a we, right? So it's a me, you, and we kind of equation altogether. And they create that open ability to collaborate, to engage one another, because the idea here is not in the wisdom of one, but the idea is in the wisdom and the creativity and the innovation of the collective. Right? It's about creating the open, engaging, collaborative environment in your organization. The third quality of an inclusive leader is this: they are totally honest and they're totally kind. So these are the leaders that allows their people to be totally honest with their opinions, with their feelings, with their feedback, right? And at the same time, to be totally kind when giving those feedback, opinions, and feedback. Just because I'm honest with you doesn't mean I'm cruel to you, right? It's about being totally kind. It's about being able to respect one another for our views and to be able to honor each other in our presence here. That is the quality of the third quality of an inclusive leader: totally honest, totally kind. And the last one is this, right? An inclusive leader constantly build trust between themselves and other people, and people with one another in their teams here. And there are 3 simple ideas that this trust is being built upon, ladies and gentlemen. The first one here is this: can we trust each other in our logic and in our competency here? So an inclusive leader makes sure that people are actually well equipped, they are competent, they are resourced, they are trained, so that people can understand what we do and the things that we do, that we can trust in the logic and competency of our work. The second area of building trust is this: that the inclusive leader help one another to figure out or to realize that every one of us is being real, right, for who we are. And to be real essentially is about, hey, what can the inclusive leader do to build an environment of psychological safety, right, that allows people to ask the questions that they must and share the concerns that they want to, and people can do this without fear and consequences, right? That's the second thing. And the third thing about trust essentially is this, right? The inclusive leader helps people to trust each other, that we care for each other in the decisions that we make. So some decisions that we make may not favor another person, but the other person will feel that, hey, we are making this decision because you care for every one of us, because that is the best decision for our organization. So that's the fourth quality of the inclusive leader. Now, let me just talk a little bit about, segue a little bit and go into the 4 enemies of inclusive leadership. Now, do you face these enemies as you lead your teams? lead your organizations every day, right? Because it does tell you whether you are an inclusive leader or you're not, right? So the first enemy of inclusive leadership is this. It is about your unconscious biases. It's about my unconscious bias. It's about your unconscious biases, right? So what does this mean? It means what are some things that, that we are unconscious about, but we actually have an affinity bias, maybe a gender bias, or maybe even a confirmation bias. An affinity bias means something like, hey, I'm looking for something that I like. So if you say something that I like, I'm more likely to agree with you, right? But if you say something that I don't like, I'm more likely to shut you down. I'm more likely to disagree with you, right? So do you have those unconscious bias? That is the first enemy. The second enemy essentially is this, is the need for control. So a lot of times leaders, wants to have control in the outcomes, control in the process. And when we see something that actually challenges the control, very often, whether we are aware of it consciously or we are subconscious about it, we shut diversity down. That's a second enemy of control. The second enemy of inclusive leadership here. The third enemy of inclusive leadership are past successes, right? So, a lot of times, you hear people say, oh, I've done this before in my previous company. I've done this with a previous team. If it worked then, it should work now. So past successes actually do not guarantee present situations because things could have changed. But because we hold on to those past successes, it may impede new ideas, new ways of doing things, new perspectives, right? And the last enemy of inclusive leadership is status quo. Status quo has this luring, lulling draw, right? That draws us into a sense of complacency. Whatever is not broken, don't change it. If people are not happy, don't talk about it. If people have something to say, but it may upset somebody, just keep the calm, keep the peace, right? Sometimes we preserve status quo, and in my belief, I personally feel that status quo, the love of status quo is probably the greatest enemy to the best things, that we want for our teams and for our organizations. So let me just go on to the third idea here right now, right? The things that, an inclusive leader do all the time to build diversity and for it to thrive and flourish in their teams, right? So what are these four things here? The first thing an inclusive leader do to build diversity is that they help others feel included. So remember what I said, right? It's not about here I am, but it's about there you are. It's about making sure that people are being noticed, people are being included into the conversations, people are included into the decision process. When leaders consciously and intentionally do that, people feel that their diverse, their opinions and their thinking matters to the overall equation here. The second thing that inclusive leaders does is this, right? They help others learn safely. In other words, you can learn and you can fail and you feel safe about it. The third thing is this, right? You help others contribute their very best. Now, my very best is not your very best. And sometimes as leaders, we may feel that our ways are the better ways than others, right? But yet, you and I know it's not true. We are all given different unique gifts, different unique strengths. And, in a diverse organization, inclusive leaders allow people to figure out how to bring their very best to the conversation and to the table. And last but not least, inclusive leaders, help one another to be able to challenge the status quo. I think that is self-explanatory. You kind of know what it means, right? So this brings us to the final point here, ladies and gentlemen, which is this. What is one thing that you must do for yourself in order to be that inclusive leader, in order to have all those qualities of the inclusive leader, in order to be able to defeat all the enemies of the inclusive leader, in order to be able to do all those things for your people to build that thriving, diverse organization? Well, that one thing that I think we need to do is this, right? Well, before I go into that, I must premise to say this, right? Actually, we can do many things. But I feel personally that this is one thing that is really non-negotiable, that is something that is integral to the rest of other things that we do. And that one thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that the inclusive leader must learn how to talk better. The inclusive leader, must be able to own our own conversations better. We must know, what we are talking about. We must know how we are talking. We must know why we are talking. And why is that important? Because everything that we do is about the conversations that we have. Leadership is about conversations. Relationship is about conversations. Culture is about conversations. This is probably one of my most favorite refrains, right? And it holds true to many things here, because the leaders that you can work with, you feel open to, and you feel safe with. The people, same thing, right? You feel open, safe to, comfortable. It is because, ladies and gentlemen, that we have this ability to have amazing conversations. The quality of our conversation allows us to have the ability of diversity in action. So, quick question for everybody here, right? Now, according to Soundwave, they figure out that people actually can talk in 9 different ways. The way we inquire, probe, diagnose, articulate, advise, advocate, critique, correct, and challenge. So the question is this, right? Which voices do you think inclusive leaders should not use? Now, I'm mindful that it's already 1 p.m. I'm probably going to take another 5 more minutes to finish. So if you guys could stay on for another 5 more minutes, I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. So back to the question here, right? So which voices do you think inclusive leaders should not use? So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to look at these 9 voices here that I'm showing here on the screen. Use the chat box and respond to me on this, right? Which voices do you think inclusive leaders should not be using? All right. So we got a summation here, the voice of critique, very interesting. Advice, very cool. What else is there? Critique, I love the response so far. Anyone else? Challenge, yeah, of course, yeah. What else? So critique, advice, challenge, right? Now this is really interesting. So thank you for those of you that have responded to my question here. The answer to this question is this. The question is this: which voices inclusive leaders should not use? The answer is none, right? In other words, inclusive leaders should be using all 9 different voices. They should not ignore one voice over another. They should have the ability to use all 9 different voices. Why is that? Because according to Soundwave, if you use your inquire properly, you're engaging people. If you probe, you're getting insights. If you diagnose, you're gaining solutions. If you articulate, you're gaining influence. If you advise, you're gaining credibility. If you advocate, you're gaining impact. If you critique, you're actually helping people make better decisions. If you correct, you're making improvement. And when you challenge people skillfully and positively, you're bringing change positively to the team here. Now, the reasons I think why some of us feel that certain voices should not be used is because sometimes when we are unaware of our voices and we are not very good in using them, instead of having all this positive impact here, we actually create negative impact. We come across as interrogating people, intruding people, complexifying issues, being verbose, patronizing, preachy, punish, and attacking people's opinions, right? So it's not a question of which voices should we not use as inclusive leaders, but it's more a question of how can inclusive leaders use our voices even better so that we can build safety, we can build engagement, we can build collaboration, we can build openness, for diversity to thrive in our organization. So for us to be able to build high-performing teams with diversity, we just need to do something really, really simple, ladies and gentlemen, in the way we talk. We just need to make a small change in the way we talk. A small change in the way we talk simply means this, right? To figure out how are you actually talking to people all the time. Very often we are unaware, we are unconscious, but it is definitely a very simple, small step to take to figure out how you talk. And then ask yourself the next question. Am I engaging people or am I pushing people away? Am I helping people make decisions or am I criticizing people here, right? It's a small change in the way we talk. First, by being aware, and second, by changing how we talk. And small change in the way we talk can translate to big wins, for diversity. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, my question to you is this: do you know your sound wave? Do you know how you talk? So for those of us who are curious about how we talk as inclusive leaders, you can go to the Soundwave website and do what they call the Brilliance 3, right? Which essentially will give you your top 3 ways of conversations with people. Now, when I did mine, it was just fascinating and revealing for me to be able to do something like this, to be able to figure out how I talk and to realize, oh my gosh, I can actually talk very differently. So go to the website of www.soundwave.global, or you can just click on the QR code that will bring you to the website for the assessment. The second thing here is this, right? If you have questions regarding what I'm talking about, how do we build high performance in a diverse organization, and you want to have a conversation with me, go ahead and contact us, right? Either at our website or email us at info@strengthasia.com. And finally, for all of you who are individuals, and if you're thinking, oh gosh, this is really interesting, how can I get to know my voice and attend a workshop to kind of, learn more about myself? Well, we are, organizing an online workshop called The Power of Communication using the sound wave approach and methodology here, right? So if you're interested, go ahead, scan the QR code and it will give you more details on the workshop here. And for those of you who are Singaporeans or you are in Singapore and you have access to Skills Future, this program is Skills Future enabled. So that's it. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for your indulgence in giving me the extra 6 minutes here. I'm looking at the chat here. I don't see any questions on the chat here.
Kim Pong, there is actually one question.
Oh, there is. Okay, good.
Yes.
Go for it. Yep.
This is from Jyoti. She asked whether are there any free assessment to evaluate our own biases?
Okay, Jyoti, I do not know how to answer that question because I have not come across any assessment on biases, but I'm sure they are there out there somewhere. So I'm sorry I could not answer that question. Jyoti asked, but is this workshop from Gallup? The answer is no. So this workshop is actually, this Power of Communication workshop is actually organized by Strength Asia. And we are using the Sound Wave Brilliance 3 to help you figure out what are your top 3 voices, and using that information and knowledge to help you figure out about how you talk, how you're being heard, and how you can have verbal strategies, right? To be able to talk to different stakeholders in your relationships. So I hope that is useful. YMSL Rockwall Heath has shared that Harvard has some free assessments for the biases question. So thank you very much, YMSL Rockwall Heath. Thanks for that contribution. Beautiful. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there is.
Oh, what is that?
Yeah, so from Ching Ching, yeah.
Okay, if our teams is fixed and not diverse in race, what can we do to increase diversity? Ching Ching, thank you very much for that wonderful question. I think just because we are not diverse in race does not mean we do not have diversity. I think diversity is not just about race, but diversity is also about ideas. It's also about perspectives. It's also about conversations. So one of the things I think we can increase diversity within a team that is homogeneously, of the same ethnicity, right? I think it's really about helping each other, becoming more curious with one another, and not to assume that we know the same thing or we share the same background or culture or information. So it's about the ability to be curious, the ability to be intellectually humble, the ability to be able to respect each other from where we come from. And I dare suggest that, one of the best ways of being curious is in our ability to talk to one another. So knowing our voices and how we talk actually does tell us a little bit of how curious we are, or how habitual we are in the conversations with one another. So I hope that is helpful for you, Ching Ching. I know that's already past 1 p.m. So for those that needs to leave, you're welcome to leave the session. But for those that wants to stay on and have a little bit more interaction with me, I am more than happy to stay back and answer your questions, right? So I think I got something from William Tan here that says diversity is not about gender or race, it's about talent and the competencies we are looking for. William, absolutely spot on. And I think you affirm and you added on to what I was sharing just now with Ching Ching. Thank you very much. Angelina Han also talks about diversity can be coming from skill set, perspective, and culture. Lovely. And I agree with that also. Thank you, Angelina Han, for adding on to that. Organizational relationship building, L4 of the diploma in LPM course covers this, right? So for those that knows what it is, go check it out. I think that's it, isn't it, Dina?
Kim Pong, maybe you just want to talk a bit, because Chin Chin was asking whether our talent teams, each of us are unique, it actually contributes to diversity.
Okay, cool. So how about the Gallup talent themes? Each of us have unique talent themes. So this contributes to diversity, right? Absolutely spot on. Well, according to the Gallup research, Chin, to find somebody that thinks, feel, and behave like you do in the top dominant talent teams that you have, that probability is 1 in 33 million, right? In other words, out of 33 million people, you might just find one person that think, feel, and behave like you do, although I've never seen that, right? So yeah, because of that very nature, the very innate response to our environment, to people around us, through those talent themes, as Gallup calls them, we actually are very, very diverse in our organization. So you're right, diversity is not just about race. It is really more about race. It is exactly what you say. It is about how we think, how we feel, how we behave, right? Through the context and through the lenses of those talent themes. Thank you very much. I think that's it. Okay, cool. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for staying on. It has been a great pleasure to share this conversation with everybody. And we hope to see you at the next talk. So watch out, as we send out the emails, do sign on, and I would love to see you again in our next conversation. So with that, everybody, thank you very much. Bye-bye. Take care.